Today we're building, finishing, and installing 2 floating wood shelves with some basic woodworking tools. The shelves we're making today each measure approximately 3.5 inches thick by 6.25 inches wide by 4 feet long, and they're made from clear pine, which my son and I picked up at our local lumber yard. If you want to build the exact same shelves, here's the list of supplies you'll need to complete today's project. Before any cutting begins, take a moment to look over the boards for any signs of defects that you don't want to show. Then mark the other side as the good side. Once that's complete, it's time to cut the 2 front pieces for each shelf. Set your miter saw to a 45-degree bevel, making sure that the good side is up, and make your first cut right at the end of the board. If you're making more than one shelf like I am and would like to get 2 pieces out of one 8-foot board, measure down 47 7/8 and make a mark. Flip the board end for end and make a second bevel cut. In case you're wondering why 47 7/8, which is an 1/8 inch under 4 feet, it's to account for the kerf or the waste that the blade produces as it makes the cut. Moving on, once you're happy with your bevel cuts, set the 2 pieces aside. With the remaining 1x4 material, it's time to make the 4 sides. With the saw still set at a beveled angle, make a cut. This time measure down 6.25 inches, make a mark, and turn the saw back to 0 degrees and make a straight cut. You'll need a total of 4 of these, so repeat the process until you have them all complete. At this point, it's okay to do a little pre-assembly so that you can get an accurate measurement of the top and bottom pieces. Before applying any glue, it's always a good idea to check how the miters are fitting up. Then once you're satisfied, add glue to both sides and fasten with a few brads. Repeat the same process for the other sides. Then once you're done, you can now take a measurement for the top and bottom pieces. Just make sure you're measuring right at the miter joint itself and not at the other end. Moving on, square cut one end of the 1x6. Then measure down the distance of your top piece and make a cut. Repeat the same process for all 4 pieces. Because you don't want the glue to dry on the miter joints before you're able to finish the shelves themselves, you're going to want to move relatively quickly so you can get the top and the bottoms on and nailed up. You may also need to recut the top and bottom boards if they're too long, and that's okay. It's better to sneak up on it than to overshoot and leave it too short. You may also need to use a clamp to help you hold everything together before tacking it with a few brads. Just make sure that you do your best to keep the joints flush and tight, because the better you do at keeping everything flush, the less sanding you'll have to do later on. After giving the glue about 30 to 60 minutes to dry, start sanding by hand or with a random orbital, starting with 120 grit sandpaper and working your way up to about a 220. Before moving on to staining and finishing, inspect all the seams and joints to look for any small gaps. If you find some, a really quick and easy way to fill them is to make your own wood filler with the sawdust you've been creating. Simply add a little glue to the gap, pressing it down into the joint, and then sprinkle it with sawdust, working it down into the joint as well. With a sander, sand the joint smooth. Once you're satisfied with all your work and everything is dry, wipe all surfaces with a tack cloth. It's also very helpful at this point to put your shelves up on some scrap wood spacers to give you better control over the finishing process. There are different ways to apply stain, but I personally like applying stain with a good rag so that I can work it well into the wood. Once everything is coated well, and after you've made sure that there's no drips or runs, follow the manufacturer's recommended drying time before finishing with a top coat. For projects like this, a good water-based polyurethane works well, applying 3 coats with a synthetic brush or a cheap foam brush if you don't want to spend the money. Just make sure you sand lightly between coats with 220 or higher grit sandpaper. Once that's done, go back and fill the brad holes with a wood filler like Minwax wood putty, which matches your stain color. So now that everything is built and completely finished, it's time to install. But before we do that, we have to make the cleats for the shelves, and those are made from a simple piece of 2x4. The cleat is sized to fit in between the top and bottom pieces, and to get a good snug fit, you'll have to rip the 2x4 down to around 2 inches. The idea is to fill the space in width, but leave a gap in its length for adjustments later on. Once you've settled on your shelves locations, use some painter's tape to locate the left and the right sides, then make a pencil line in between the tape marks at the correct height. Next, draw a level line that's a few inches less than 4 feet long and 3/4 of an inch below the pencil line you just marked. Once that's done, find the center point between the 2 tape pieces, which should be 2 feet or half the distance of your shelf. Next, use a stud finder to mark out all the studs that intersect with that level line. From there, mark the center line of your cleat. Then match up the cleat center line to the center line on the wall, and then transfer the stud layout marks to the cleat. Then once you have the lines transferred to the face of the cleat, pre-drill for 2 screws for each stud, one on the top and one on the bottom. Lastly, hold the cleat back up to the wall, matching center lines and level line, and secure it with 3-inch screws. As a quick side note, you may need to add more support to the cleat if the stud layout didn't work in your favor. To do that, simply pre-drill through the cleat with a thin bit. Then once you remove the cleat from the wall, you'll use those holes as a guide to pre-drill with the proper size bit for a pair of wall anchors. With the cleat now back into its original position, countersink the holes and then carefully and slowly drive the screws until they're secure. Now that you can park a truck on these cleats, it's time to install the shelves. It starts by pre-drilling a few small holes for set screws that hold the shelf to the cleat. Because of the snug fit of the cleat, I personally have found that it doesn't take but a few screws to make it secure. For this 4-foot shelf, let's pre-drill and countersink for 3 screws on the top and 2 on the bottom. To install, slide the shelf over the cleat, and because we left a little room in the cleat, you can make small adjustments to the left or to the right. Once you're satisfied with its position, hold it firmly to the wall and at the same time drive the set screws home. Because my stain is dark and my screws are black, I don't feel the need to cover them up, but if you've stained or painted yourselves a lighter color, you may want to get some screw caps to cover them. All that's left to do is to go ahead and decorate it. If you need any help with the power tools that we used today, I'll leave my power tools playlist right here for you to check out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.